I think there's a big difference between someone copying your art style and someone messaging you death threats. What up? Yeah, so this has kind of been going on all week, and Saturday, it kind of got out of control, and I really had to address it. It's a topic that I really care about a lot, and I know there's a lot of opinions on this, and I would love to hear any opinions that you have, basically. I don't want to add to the heat here. I don't want to add to the anger. So I did my best to see all the sides of it, to try to see Alma's perspective. I'm trying to lay it all out in a way where you can certainly see both sides while also giving my opinions on the matter. I haven't seen anything about art style theft in a while. I really thought that we were kind of past it. I do think this is a very interesting one, and it's worth talking about. So this all actually kind of starts with this girl, Alma. All right, and this is Alma's Instagram page. Alma is an incredible artist. She does this kind of aesthetic anime look that's, really coming into popularity now. And I would like to say that she is actually kind of one of the spearheaders for this look, one of the leading artists. This is a very, very defined style as well. Definitely in the anime, quote unquote, style vein. But I think she has a very, very defined style that is recognizable, unique. All right, so we got this really, really great artist, honestly, really young still. You can see the, classic, do not repost, trace, copy, or use my art. If anyone knows, why you would not want someone to repost or trace your art, please let me know. I really can't relate personally, but I do understand that it's something that people feel. This is not about tracing. This is not about copying or art theft. This is a story about art style theft, which a lot of people nowadays kind of agree is not a thing and that it's just kind of a non-issue. However, it just became an issue. Here is another artist, Case, I think. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but it could be Cassie or Casey, but I think I'm going to say Case. Let me know if you know that that's incorrect. But yeah, so you can see that the palette's really similar. Absolutely none of these are traced, or even the ideas are not copied. You can see here that Case actually details all of their inspirations in their story. So all of the style inspirations, they actually have a story that kind of goes through it and lets people know who they should follow if they like the style. This is just, it's very clear that they understand that they are part of an art style, and that all of these artists are kind of part of it. So Case, he just wrote that he is quitting art and Instagram. Why am I leaving? I just decided to quit art and Instagram because all this drama has become too much for me to handle mentally and emotionally with all the threats and harassment I have received over the number of days this drama has been dragged along. I think this is just such a shocking thing to read. Yeah, to think about a beginner artist completely quitting. Just they just can't do it anymore because they're getting so much harassment. So Alma first messaged me about this on May 1st. Then she messaged me a week later, 13th of May, while also posting on her story about me and Celia, who is another artist who apparently actually knows Alma in person. They went to school together, and it's kind of a similar situation where Celia has a similar style, and Alma was kind of asking her to change her style. I agree there are many similarities between our art styles, as I was very inspired by her and promised I would try my best to change my art style for both our sakes. I think it's quite unrealistic to expect someone to completely change their art style in this time span of 1 week, and the harassment I received is just not justified at all. He, for a while, was just kind of dealing with the harassment and hate from Alma's fans and just trying to keep on going anyways. But after a while, look, I'm getting death threats because my style is too similar to another artist. This isn't a joke anymore, it's harassment. I literally can't stop shaking. It's really scary. Here is kind of pretty clearly what happened from Case's perspective. So Alma reaches out. Hey there, sorry this is kind of sudden, but I think I should talk to you about this. Lately people have been complaining to me about how your art style is greatly influenced by some artists, including me. Then I decided to check out your account, and I also agree that you're being too heavily inspired by me and other artists. And I think it's so aggressive that this is the very, very first message that they ever have, and it kind of shows the mindset here. You're being too heavily inspired by me and other artists, which I don't even understand, because me and other artists, that's the whole thing. That's what art is. You're too similar and you have to change. It's very strange to me. This also really discourages me to continue making art. I don't expect you to change, but I hope that you can adjust to another art style that is less similar to mine. Thank you for reading this. I really hope you understand. She's letting him know that people have reached out to her and said their art styles are really similar and it's confusing to them. Is this going to be an issue for them moving forward as they're trying to brand themselves as artists? So then Case says, hello, I do acknowledge that you're one of my main inspirations and I have credited you in certain posts. Credited in the actual post. They actually link to Alma's Instagram. This is such a great example of someone doing everything right, I would say. Linking your art idol in every single piece you publish is not common at all. It is a huge act of goodwill. I think that's the most that you can do in this situation. I don't know what else she wants. They're basically a walking advertisement for you at this point. I don't understand how that discourages Alma from making art, but I digress. I will try to change the way I lay out things. I'm assuming it's my character reference sheet, ? I think Case is genuinely like, which thing crossed a line for you? As for the colors, I really just use pastel and saturated colors, which are my favorite colors to use in artwork, and I'm not sure I want to stop using them. I'm really sorry for making you uncomfortable, and I really hope that we can move past this. Case definitely is acknowledging, you're my main influence. I'm like, bow down to you. All right, so Alma says, thank you for being understanding. Being influenced and learning is a wonderful thing, but please make sure you're not being too heavily inspired by the way a certain artist draws. I wish you the best of luck with your art. So then a couple days later, around a week after, it says, Alma reaches out again in this kind of snarky way, and she says, I honestly want your opinion. Do you really think you're just using saturated colors that you really like, and then the combos just happen to look exactly like mine? You're honestly draining me out. I get DMs of people saying how they thought you were my sub account every single week, and it's killing me. My art style isn't that generic, and you're making it lose its uniqueness. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. So we really see the worry here. The worry is that her art is no longer unique. She's tried so hard to make her artwork very unique and not generic. And she thinks that by other artists kind of following in her footsteps, that her art is losing its uniqueness. Now, this is something that really beginner artists stress a lot when they're trying to choose an art style. What this does that's really awesome for Instagram art accounts is it makes you a very recognizable artist, right? When you have a very defined style and a very defined color palette, when people see your art, they know it's you, right? I think that one thing that Alma is not realizing, and I would want to tell her, your art is worth so much more than your art style. And I think she's really young and she's got an amazing career ahead of her. Styles change. Her color palette, honestly, would very likely change throughout her lifetime. It's not just the color palette. I will say there's a lot of thematic things that are very similar about them. They're all in this aesthetic genre. They all kind of use the same kind of themes, honestly. Her art still stands out a lot. How terrible must that be to really genuinely think your art style is the main worth of your art? It's just completely false. And I think it's a very toxic way to look at your own art. And I think that's why she's now seeing, I feel like I don't want to draw anymore because someone's copying me. Like, that is what comes from your own self-doubt in your work. Thinking that your style and your color palette is all you have going for you. It's just so wrong and so painful to read. I think that Alma genuinely feels this way. I don't think she's lying at all about how she feels about this. I think it is crushing her. And I just feel like that is so sad. You see these people trying to kind of emulate her, and it's just not quite hitting the mark. And this is always what happens with art style theft. Like, the copies are never as good as their original. It never happens. What ends up happening is the copies copy their idol for a while. It helps them grow as an artist, and by the time they are almost to the level of their given artist, they have moved on to other things, and their art has a uniqueness of its own. So she made these very aggressive statements like, it's killing me, you're making my art lose its uniqueness, please give me a break. And this is like a week after her first message where things were pretty amicable. Case is like, sorry you feel that way, I've been trying to change my style so that it's more original, and I understand that you're frustrated, but changing styles is a slow process and not something I can do in one day. But asking me to stop doing art because it upsets you seeing my profile is a little unfair. Making art makes me happy, and it's what gets me through the day, especially with quarantine lately and some family issues that have arisen. Art has helped me and made me feel happy, so please don't ask me to stop creating art. This is also extremely heartbreaking because this is the person who has just posted that they are quitting art. It makes me really sad coming from you, someone who I look up to. Yeah, Case is just like completely blindsided. Honestly, why is this hurting you? It makes no sense. And it's like, it's totally unfair for Alma to ask Case to stop doing art. I think that's very clear. That's clearly wrong. I don't see how the colors are that similar. Could you please show an example of what you mean so I can understand better? I asked for your opinion. How do you feel having such a similar palette to mine? Stop playing the victim. And here Alma posts side-by-side comparisons of their feeds. And you can kind of see, honestly, if you squint your eyes, it does all blur together. That pink is definitely the same pink. I do think that the color was picked. Do I think there's anything wrong with that? No, I don't think there's anything wrong with color picking from other artists. Here are art Instagrams side by side. If you don't look closely, you can't even tell these are drawn by two different people. You're saying this is original. You are obviously too heavily influenced to the point that you can't tell whether you're copying or not, which I think that is so funny because if they can't tell if they're copying, if they're not literally staring at your art and then copying it and it just kind of flowing out naturally because they've been influenced by you, that's their art. It's so weird to just aggressively tell someone that they're too heavily influenced. I feel like it's wrong. Let me know if you disagree. There's so many people who use pastels and these colors. Those are the first artists I thought of. This one right here, the second one is Celia. But yeah, you can kind of see, if you squint your eyes, this is all basically the same pink. And it's kind of this aesthetic movement, as I was saying before. This color is trending right now, I would say, in this movement, and I think that is totally fine. Alma says, oh honey, their shades of the last two were different. You can't say those two look like mine. And this one is my classmate. She copies me too. What do you expect? So now Celia's brought into the conversation, and Alma's actually had an altercation with Celia, which we'll go into. But basically Case brings up a bunch of other examples, and I think it's just really interesting that Alma's kind of yeah, that one's copying me too. You know what? I'll bring this up for the last time because I'm exhausted, and looking at your art makes me want to perish. Again, I don't think that Alma's lying about this. I believe that this is how she feels, and it's stressful to put that kind of anguish and emotional distress on someone else, saying that it's Case's fault. That's such a hard thing to hear from your number one idol. Also, looking at your art makes me want to perish. Keep on doing what you're doing, but that means you're decided to be overshadowed by another artist. Sure, yeah, she is. What's wrong with that? Overshadow someone. Why does it hurt you so much to overshadow beginner artists? I don't get it. People will be able to tell right away who is your big inspiration. Your art just isn't you at all. This is honestly Alma speaking the truth. The truth is, when you do this, people can tell that you're just inspired by another artist. Again, she does link the profile, but you can tell from looking at their accounts who probably started that art style because it's just more developed and it's more distinguished. But it's funny the way that she's wording this almost defensively, and you could tell that she doesn't really believe it. She's kind of sour grapesing it because she's well, at least I'm still going to be known as the better artist. She's trying to convince herself almost, I think. Why would it hurt you then? If this is true and you know this is true, why does it make you want to stop drawing? I blocked that friend a while ago. Blocked her. She blocked Celia. It's so weird. And this is a person that she knew in real life. And she blocked her because she was copying her art style. If you refuse to change, then I will. You just keep playing dumb, so I'll be the one to move on here. So she basically says, I guess I'm going to have to change my style because I don't want to be, lumped in with you. And if that's the way you feel, go for it. Evolve your style again. I think that she's talented enough to come up with something else. However, it's just going to keep happening. This is what happens. This is what art is. If you come up with another palette that works really well, I guarantee a bunch of other aesthetic artists are going to use that palette. That's what we do. I just feel really bad for Case having to read this, honestly. It would crush me to read this from one of my icons. To read this from, one of my art idols. That my art makes them want to perish. That just, it's so crushing. So Case says, I'm sorry you're angry about this, and I understand that it's upsetting to have people message you about this, but that gives you no right to be rude to me. To my understanding, you can't own a color palette, nor copyright colors. You can always use a color palette. That's not something that we have considered, putting laws around, mostly because potentially there's a spectrum of colors, but there actually is a finite amount of colors. I understand that pink backgrounds are seen as your thing, and that's why I've changed my backgrounds to more purpley blue. He's made an effort there. Even then, many artists use pink and pastel backgrounds. I can name so many, and it's not that original. Alma says, Since when have I been rude? I can't imagine what Alma is like in real life. If this conversation has been civil in Alma's eyes, I am a little bit worried. It's fine. Everything you do go together and results in something really similar to mine. Sorry, I'm getting tired of like paraphrasing. Basically, just they're arguing about like semantics. You know, it's not just the pink background. It's like everything comes together in the same way as mine. And there's really not anything specific that Alma's pointing out here. The Instagram feeds feel very similar when people first land on the page. Like, how is this justifiable? How can you say that they have to stop doing that and you can't even point to a thing that they need to stop doing? I don't understand. Case says, you can't expect someone to change a style in a day. It's not possible. And I have tried to be as understanding as I can, but saying I'm a carbon copy of you is a little entitled, and telling me to give you a break is a little rude, in my opinion. I don't think that Alma intended for anything like super bad to happen, but she's acting out of emotion and blaming Case for her emotional state. The only similarity with our backgrounds are the colors. Anime style is already so generic, and it's hard to distinguish as it is. True. And I think that's another reason that Alma is very touchy about this, because Alma knows that she's kind of in this anime genre and that it is very difficult to distinguish yourself from everyone else. And I think that's why she's really hurt that someone grabbed that palette and is kind of getting away with having the mood that she worked hard to distinguish for herself. I apologize if any of my words come out as rude to you. People have been reporting me about your art and I'm going insane. Alma is stating that Case is hurting her emotional and mental state, which is not the truth. Alma's emotional state is being affected by her own beliefs about how her art has a lost value because of people copying it. If anything, it has been elevated because people are acknowledging that she's onto something and elevating her as the master of this style. I agree you're making progress on your art and I wanted to let this slide, but as you said, you haven't changed much and you kept gaining attention. I put our art side by side and still you refuse to see the similarities. I give up. And Case is like, I never disagreed. I do see similarities in our style. When did I ever refuse? Alma says, okay, you see the similarities and just refuse to change them? I would assume that Alma's literally gotten people DMing her the new artwork that Case has posted and being like, they're still doing it. They're still copying your style. And she's probably responded to them and gotten, hyped up and is just like, I'm in the right here. If you haven't changed, then keep your art private. Post them only once you've improved. Do what you want. I'm exhausted. People have brought this up as like a response to art style theft. Basically, if beginners need to do this, if they need to kind of follow an idol and almost master copy in the style, that their beginning work should be not posted online. And I disagree with this because when you're just starting out, part of what this helps you to do is to create polished, finished pieces before you're really good enough to come up with like your own color palette or before you're really able to develop your own unique style. And it kind of lets you still participate in the art community, which I've already brought up in my last video. I believe that community aspect is really core for young artists and for people who are struggling to keep going with art. I think it's important to continue participating in the community, whether or not you're stylistically very influenced by only one or two people. It's still fine to post that stuff. I do think it's a reasonable suggestion. Well, why don't you just make it private? And then at least that way, like, people won't get confused when they see it on like the feed. And I think that's reasonable. It's completely up to Case, and I personally would never recommend any beginner artists start out that way. Right after posting, you know what, do what you want, I'm exhausted, she blocks her, as she's already said that she's blocked Celia. I'm actually going to go through stories that Alma has posted about this issue. And you can also see kind of, first of all, things from Alma's perspective a little bit. So here's Alma's story. So I had this one university classmate, and ever since she discovered my account and changed her original art style 180 degrees to something that looks unnervingly similar to my style, followed every twist and turn that I make in my art, from the shading to the coloring. Every time someone tells me I'm one of their biggest inspirations and they want to draw like me, I'm flattered, but I'm also kind of threatened. So this kind of touches on her issue with Celia. I understand that no one 100% owns an art style. Doing art is about inspire and being inspired, but there are certain techniques that an artist uses in their art to make it look distinctive from others, but so heavily influenced to the point that you just straight up trying to copy most of the techniques an artist uses in their drawings to result in something that looks exactly like their art. Showing it to everyone and being so proud like it's purely your original creation is just so disrespectful and lazy. Alma has worked really hard on creating this palette. She's distinguished herself enough that I think that what she has hit on is completely her and it's completely original. And I think it took a lot of effort, and I think it took a lot of her, learning about color theory, learning about techniques. And I can understand how that might feel, finally finding this interesting palette that stands out so much. And then having someone literally like color picking those colors, they're skipping all of that background steps where you did all of this work. They see only the end result, and then they're like, I'll make something similar to that. And I get how that's frustrating, but that is how art actually works. And I kind of want to talk about this because I honestly believe that a lot of the work that's coming out on Instagram is comparably beautiful to people who, back in the Renaissance times, like worked their whole life to achieve this. The truth is we've been able to escalate that success. We can get there faster because we are all building on what past artists have created. So all of the work that Alma has put in to define this color palette, to define her style, yes, other artists are going to see that and try to take that as kind of like a jumping off point. But I can imagine that it would be frustrating to see someone kind of like leapfrog over all the work that you did and pretend that, I'm just as good an artist as she is. But the truth is, her art is noticeably more advanced, more technical, more distinguished than any of the artists that are being discussed here, because she's the master of it. And I just, again, like, she just isn't seeming to recognize that, stating that it looks exactly like her art. It truly doesn't. These beginner artists, while they are proud of their work, and I think they should be, they're not able to effectively mimic her style completely, and no one ever is. That's the thing about style theft. I've never seen that, and I don't think I ever will. As long as Alma keeps drawing, there's no way that any of these people are going to overshadow her. And she even has said that before, but I don't think she really believes it. I think she's terrified. We put hours of effort and practice into developing distinctive styles that we are proud of, not for some randos to just borrow it from us and gain attention, but it happens regardless of how uncomfortable it makes us feel, and we don't deserve to feel this way. She keeps on bringing up that, like, they don't seem to care about how it makes her feel. And I already mentioned, I think that this is a lot more of an Alma issue than anyone else's issue, but I think it is something worth looking at, because that's how Alma feels. And I don't think every single artist would feel this way, considering that, like, at a certain point of copying, you might make your favorite artist feel like they're being harassed. It's definitely a reason to try early on to mix up your art style. I think it's an important statement that copying someone's art style at some point can feel like harassment to the original artist. I think that's worth thinking about, and I think it's mostly other people who are harassing Alma about the style being similar. I think if people weren't messaging her all the time, this would probably be a non-issue. She's just hearing about it constantly, and like, people aren't really talking about how, what they like about her art anymore. They're only talking to her about how, like, her style is just like this other person, or this other person's style is like hers. Again, the big issue here is that people don't get that art style theft makes no fucking sense. They're harassing Alma because they're like, is this wrong? They're like poking her. They're just like, Alma, is this wrong? Like, look, it looks just like yours. That's wrong, right? Like, and that is frustrating, but you're attacking the wrong person. I think what really needs to be done here is people need to be, again, reminded that art style is a thing that we're all doing together. I think Alma's pretty much a beginner herself, but has gotten to that stage, especially in this genre, where she's actually one of the more advanced people in the, like, aesthetic art community. And I think that she really is spearheading. She's made a wave. She's made a new wave. And what happens is other artists will get sucked into that wave. That's a good thing. It's very expected and normal. Seeing her underlings, I will say, like, following in her footsteps is somehow painful to her because she values her art so lowly. And they're moving at a faster rate and working a lot less hard than she did. And so they're getting closer to her at a rapid pace because she did all of that work for them. And she's like, that's cheating. She doesn't get that that is literally what is supposed to happen. That's what we are doing. That's what we're all doing here as artists. I'm not saying that someone completely copying someone's style is like, just, they should be super grateful for it. But I am saying that this is like, this is what should happen as far as art goes, as far as like furthering just aesthetics in general. This is definitely what should happen. Trends are to be followed. And I won't tell Alma how to feel, but I do think that seeing how this has made her feel, I think she's going to struggle with her art until she can realize the value of it. That her art is worth a lot more than just the color palette that she's chosen. That's actually not what makes her art unique. I'm grateful seeing my account grow over the years and that people enjoy what I'm doing, but to get such toxic kind of support in response, like people trying to have the exact same art style, reposting my art, copying, using my art and characters as references, surely has discouraged me from continuing to create art. So she brings up other issues as well, right? Completely separate from this. She's getting upset about people reposting her art, copying her art. I have not seen the work that she's talking about, but I think that Alma would be hurt by this even if they did tag her in the piece. And she's saying it discourages her from continuing to create art, that people are inspired by her and using her art as reference. And she's stating this very like matter-of-factly, like that makes sense. Like, of course, those things would make me not want to draw art anymore. And I think that is not what most of us would feel from that. I don't think she realizes that. There are 1,000 shades to every color out there. You have nearly the exact same color combos, shadings and layouts and background decoration I'm using is just disappointing. And I think it's more just that like all of these things are very similar. That's kind of like getting to her and getting to her fans and kind of making them feel like they're in the right here. But it's worth noting that these themes are coming from elsewhere as well, that they're coming from the stylistic genre of this aesthetic art movement. This artist's name has constantly been popping up in my DMs. I didn't want to call her out, but still people are figuring things out on their own. I did try talking to her twice after constantly receiving reports from people about how much our styles look alike. She continued to gain attention with her heavily influenced art. I was really uncomfortable, so I stopped confronting and blocked her. In case you know who this is, please don't send them hate messages. It stalls no problem. And that text is super small and difficult to read, by the way, but she did say it. She also at the same time is saying, this person ruined my life. This person is making me want to stop drawing. The artist also did mention in her stories how one of her biggest inspirations was me and Celia. Celia was my university classmate. I did talk to her and she has gotten so much improvement compared to the other girl though. I think she wants to state that even Case's other inspiration, Celia, was heavily inspired by me. So basically all of Case's inspiration leads back to Alma. Even though Case is trying to kind of diversify her style, it is not successful because her other inspiration was also inspired by Alma. Okay, so once again, she apologizes, and this time with much more cooperative attitude. Remember when I first reached out to her, and she just kind of refused to change her colors. Apologizing means acknowledging your mistake and changing. From here on, I'm excited to see her grow. Things are good. Though with her ways of using words, apologizing, and explaining the problem, I can see the effort of turning me into the villain. You were at the wrong, and I get the right to get mad, girl. If you don't want people to get upset at you, then don't do it in the first place. This is such a weird, backhanded way to polish off this previous message. It's so immature to have added this when I believe that the first message there is trying to kind of wrap things up and let her followers know, hey, she's working on it, no need to harass her. But then she's like, but you know, she's still our enemy. I think that Alma would say, you know, those are my feelings. Why should I have to hide my feelings? I'm allowed to express myself, and I think that's true. It's just, I think, an immature way to word it. And she's making a lot of assumptions there. So then she says this, why the fuck did that Case and Celia have to fuck my life up so badly? Please stop bringing them up. They're dead to me now. So I can understand that Alma's getting a bunch of comments about this, a bunch of DMs, but she now disowns Celia, who she's already said before was changing and growing, and obviously Case, and she names them by name. So she's not trying to hide that anymore either. Obviously she's dealing with some stuff, but yeah, and this is definitely her self-expression at its finest. People defending them are saying how forcing them to change their art style might be really unfair and discouraging. But did those guys ever think how me, the original artist, might feel from the start? What about me? Am I not discouraged? Is it not unfair for me? My heart feels like it could burst any moment. I'm on the verge of tears. Are my feelings trash? Is it just because I have a bigger follower base that means I'm in the wrong and that I'm a bully, that I shouldn't feel any pain, and yet the support goes towards someone that causes things to hurt me this much? So this is where I think that Alma's case gets really deep. She's like probably getting a bunch of hate from the other people who maybe disagree with her or don't believe in art style theft and are just like, you're wrong here, and you've used your follower base to attack this other person. So she's like, look, I'm feeling these things. This is hurting me. She says her heart feels like it could burst. She's on the verge of tears. I don't think that she is lying about this at all. I think that she is genuinely extremely distressed, possibly exactly the same amount of distress as the other artists who have been harassed and threatened. I think the problem here is that Alma is like, they did this to me. Maybe this art style theft harassment is just as bad as being given a death threat, but I don't think it is. And I think that the real issue here is that Alma is kind of letting these emotions that are caused by her own self-doubt rule her interactions with other artists in her genre who should be her closest allies. And the thing that she's touching on here with the bigger follower account, she does have, almost 80,000 followers who, when every time she posts a story like this, they kind of want to come to her rescue. Having a big follower account does come with a little bit of responsibility. The things that you say have big sway. The stories that you tell and the way that you phrase things make waves. You can't control everything that your followers are going to do, and it's important to learn that lesson. Was it then wrong for Alma to express her feelings? No, I don't think it was morally wrong, but the backlash that she's getting is the repercussions of that. Sometimes you don't necessarily need to post every little thing that you're upset about. She's acting as if she didn't expect this to happen, and she probably didn't. And it's a learning experience. If a number of people are saying the same thing about you, it's time to change. Don't be yourself, be the best version of yourself. I actually think this is very interesting. It's a recommendation. It's not the right thing to do to change when you get negative criticism. There's a lot of examples of people who persevered because they really believed in a vision or what they were doing, and even though everyone thought they were wrong, they actually ended up carving a new space for themselves. You can tell that Case is very intelligent and very strong. And I think that is why Case was kind of like, no, I am in the right here, and I'm going to continue learning the way that I want to learn. And I think that that's a very admirable trait, and I think it's good. I personally wouldn't have done that probably when I was a young artist. And I think it's very admirable that Case continued to use that color palette that they also loved, They thought that aesthetic was right where they wanted to be. And I think it's really admirable that Case stayed there even through the criticism. I don't think that's something to be shamed. And I don't agree that you should change yourself every time that other people are criticizing you a lot. I think you need to have strong core values and know what you're doing is right. And I think that you should definitely, when you're being criticized, take a closer look. But then after looking at it, which I think that Case did, I think Case took a very careful look over, and I think that Case decided what I'm doing is what I want to do. And I love this, don't be yourself, be the best version of yourself. I actually think that's a really cool quote. It's such a bold statement. It's like he's saying, yourself isn't good enough. Be a better version of yourself. I feel like that's the way that this is kind of twisting it. I just think it's kind of wrong. I do think that we should all strive to be the best version of ourselves, but being criticized by other people isn't always proof that you're not being the best version of yourself. And also, it's important to note, especially in this situation, that the critics are loud. They're basically only hearing from the critics. You're not necessarily getting all of the positive feedback to weigh out with the criticism. I have come across people who draw exactly like Alma to the point where if I come across their art, it may take me a bit to realize that I'm not looking at Alma's art. And I can only imagine how upsetting it is. Referencing is fine, but copying to the point where someone can't tell if a piece was drawn by you or the original artist who inspired you is not. I've lost count of how many pictures I found floating around that I thought were drawn by them, but turned out to be someone who was heavily inspired by their style and no one else's. I think it's in Alma's right to finally speak up after years if this is bothering them. So this is definitely the other side of it. They have come across people's work that they automatically think is Alma's because of the style is so similar, and then they find out that it's not Alma's, and that's quite a shock. To think that you're on your friend's page because it looks so similar, I can totally see how that would be something that I would, as a fan, want to alert Alma of. And I think that's why Alma just got a bunch of messages about it. Obviously, some people have very strong opinions about that, this amount of copying, this level of trying to replicate the style is crossing a line somehow. We're always referencing other works. We're always referencing real life. We're always referencing our experiences. What I think is not being said here at all, and I think it's very interesting, is these artists are thinking of their Instagram feeds as an art form. Because if you look at piece by piece, neither Case nor Celia, I don't think, has copied any of Alma's ideas. They're the whole feed, right? That's what they're looking at. That's what Alma brought up. Both feeds side by side look similar. And that's so interesting. It doesn't really seem like art theft until you look at the whole feeds both feeds side by side. So I think this brings up something really interesting, which in the aesthetic art community, your Instagram feed, your grid, is an art form. Instagram is the medium that you're creating a massive work of art. And I think that's so cool and so interesting. And that makes your color palette so crucial. And it definitely is what's making this more of an issue. And because you're looking at this massive amount of artists' work, this is so much effort has gone into this. It's not even just one complicated piece. It's many. It's like years of effort. This isn't just one piece that's been kind of ripped off. It's feeling like her life's work. Like someone's like put their name right on your resume or your portfolio, and they're just kind of getting jobs from that. And that's kind of what it feels like. I don't think that anyone is actually doing that. But I can get that is what it feels like for Alma. These artists have worked hard to keep all of their pieces congruent. And Alma has been doing this for years. And it's amazing. There are ways that they could have been handled better. And I'm hoping that she can kind of look back and see that, and in the future deal with things like this a little bit more amicably and a little bit more diplomatically. Especially knowing now that she has a big following who care a lot about her and will basically jump at the chance to defend her. It's just something to keep in mind that that's a lot of power. I don't think that she understood that these artists were being harassed more than she was, or that they were getting death threats. And I think that once she saw the repercussions of her actions, she got very defensive. If people understand that we are all in this together, we are all creating these styles together. If we can understand that and expect it and enjoy it for what it is, I think that we wouldn't have an issue here. The issue came about when people were thinking that this was a bad thing, alerting Alma, reaching out to Alma and kind of asking her if this is okay. Obviously, Alma had her own feelings, but I think if Alma really understood this, that she was creating a style, and that, of course, people will try to replicate it as best they can, they'll never, ever really measure up. And if she kind of glorified them a little, maybe reached out and said, hey, I saw that I was one of your style icons. I think that's really awesome. Following them, keeping an eye on their progress, and maybe even promoting them. People would stop, messaging her, asking if she knows about these people, because it's very clear that they know each other and that they are in the same style vein. And this is what Loish did with Siren. This is what Ilya did with Gawais. All of the big artists that you see, they're always going to be copied. And when they see someone who's doing a good job, following in their wake, and they're progressing a lot as an artist, they reward them. They're elevating them, they're tagging them, and the artist will usually follow back and promote them. And that's what I've seen be successful, and that's what I think is a healthy way to handle this situation. Now you can really see that they've forked off and created their own niche, which is beautiful. And all of these artists are just supporting each other. And that's what we want to see. I haven't seen anything that shows that Alma in any way supported these artists who were in her same field. That trend may fade, and honestly, her artwork will possibly become less relevant because people are just afraid to even move in that direction. And I hope that doesn't happen. I think it's just really important for us to all support each other. Celia and Case were supporting Alma. They weren't trying to deny their roots. And I don't see any of that coming back the other way. I only saw resentment. These artists are trying to do her right. They're her biggest fans. And she kind of ruined that. And that's just really sad. All of these art styles that we can see around us that are very well developed, they happened because we all used each other's work as a jumping off point. And people, even right out of college, are making things now that are just blowing the lid off of what we thought was possible. This kind of anger around stealing art style, I think, is really harmful to that development. And it kind of scares people. And fear is the opposite of what we want in this community. Fear is absolutely the enemy of creation. So I'm going to go into what Celia's story is with Alma. So Celia says, a few years ago when I started to take art seriously, I was always wanting to find an outstanding style, which makes people satisfied to look at and remember it in a special way. One of the artists I admire the most at the time was Alma. I really respect her and I want to be as great as her. She's like the person who brought the awareness of pastel color palette to me, which encourages me to find more about this palette in the art community. After knowing pastel is being used by many other artists too, I decided to choose it. But I won't deny that most of it was inspired by Alma. I also love the soft eyes she made, and so I tried to make my own ones. Please remember that I was inspired by her to make them in my own ways. I never tried to draw them 100% exactly like hers. Above all, what I'd like to state here is that I also take inspiration from a lot of other artists on Instagram, DeviantArt, and Pixiv, especially those who use pastel colors and Japanese fairy Kei fashion. Alma and I talked to each other about this problem once, and at the time, I felt bad for making her sad, so I promised to change the parts that I took inspiration from her. And you can already see that Alma kind of has this pattern of using her emotions, expressing her emotions to kind of get what she wants by saying that they're making her sad. They're making her want to quit art. People trying to change the way that they're drawing to not make someone sad. It's very easy to be manipulated by someone like this, and I think that Alma will continue doing this kind of stuff. It's very important to her to be like the only one using this palette. And I don't think it's a fair thing to request of your art community that no one can use this palette. But she's kind of been getting away with it. It's making me want to stop art forever. It's killing me. She's being very dramatic, honestly. It really worked out well for her with Celia. I think that kind of may have contributed to why Alma so aggressively and so firmly went after Case, because she was so sure that she was in the right and that it would work. If I had been wiser, I should have clarified the true problem to her, that I did nothing wrong, rather than just try to say sorry and calm her down. And of course, this is not Celia's fault. I don't think that Celia needs to feel bad about this, but it's so interesting that Celia recognizes that if she had just been a little bit more strong and said, I didn't do anything wrong here, I'm only using the same color palette as you, that maybe none of this would have happened with Case. My style has changed, and it will still change. Now she and I are far apart. Why do some people keep saying that I copy her? And honestly, I do think, and if you look at Celia's feed next to Alma's, they're just so different, it's not even comparable, and I don't think anyone would say that they're similar. But it has come up many times just in the few interactions we've seen of Alma's that she kind of keeps talking about Celia. Like, most of the time that Celia's brought up, it's not really relevant that much. I tried to think of the reasons that maybe Alma would bring it up and try to give her excuses, I guess. But honestly, it's just weird that she keeps bringing Celia up, and I have no doubt in my mind that she talks about her a lot, and that this interaction with Celia, where she felt that Celia was copying her, really shaped who she is. And I feel like she just continues to kind of rehash that, and that she might say things to her followers behind the scenes a little bit to kind of keep this flame going and make her followers feel like she's a victim and everyone is trying to copy her. I don't know. I have nothing against Alma, by the way. She was always trying to avoid me and talking about me on her private medias rather than talk directly to me until that conversation a few months ago. But this mess is not caused by her only. It was my fault too for not telling her my thoughts of what the exact problem was, so I deeply apologize for this. However, I disagree with her for calling me and Case copycats and talking about us in her stories yesterday while blocking us, especially when I'm not being inspired by her anymore and Case did nothing wrong. These artists are trying to differentiate themselves from Alma. And it's just never really enough for Alma because, frankly, if we really want to get down to it, I believe that Alma is pretty upset about the color palette. And that has been something that people have talked about a lot before. You don't have ownership over a color palette. I think there should be a discussion around that. This is a new medium. This is a new art form. And I think that's always good to retouch on some of the issues that are a little bit in the gray zone whenever we're looking at something brand new and just see, do these rules still apply? And I think, for me, I do think that they still apply. I think that owning a color palette is a ridiculous concept. Actions are being taken, aggressive, harmful actions are being taken based on people's beliefs here. This discussion just isn't being had, and it's just a bunch of people threatening and trying to manipulate to get their way. And that's a problem. So what is the right response here? I honestly think that this is a very interesting case because I strongly and firmly believe that art style theft is a non-issue. And yet we have here some people who feel like they don't want to draw anymore. So who's in the wrong, right? Like, who is to blame? And I think the thing to blame here is the stigma against art style theft. If Alma understood how this art thing works, how these younger artists are elevating her position in the art community and her position as a master of the style, she could maybe feel uplifted by this instead of completely crushed, so hurt and drained that she doesn't want to draw anymore. It's not really Alma's fault that she feels this way. There is a stigma around it still. I don't see this stigma in my day-to-day, the artists that I interact with. There is none of this stigma about art style theft. It just doesn't exist, but it is out there. I think that Alma's followers, some of them have taken it upon themselves to try to right this wrong of someone stealing her art style. And if they didn't see that as a wrong, but instead understood that that is just, those are people who are elevating the artist that they're a fan of, they might not be so threatening. They might not take it upon themselves to let Alma know every single little thing that everyone does and ask her if it's wrong or if they should tackle her. It's just this mindset that these people are stealing her style and are somehow devaluing her art, when that is just not true. Alma's art is incredible. No one can take away her skill or her talent. She will always be able to create more art if she continues moving forward. But the thing that's stopping her from moving forward is thinking that her art is devalued by her creating a new style and having people follow in its footsteps. It's always tough when the real culprit is something that we really can't change right away. But that's exactly why I'm making this video, because I think it's really important to talk about this. No one is your enemy when we're doing art, and we're all doing art together. The person drawing art next to you and copying your color palette is not your enemy. They're your classmate. They're your partner. They're the people that are elevating you. I think it's just a lost opportunity here for Alma to embrace her role as a leader of her field. But I hope that she can see things from everyone's perspective and see that her art is so valuable to this community. Part of the reason that her artwork is important, and that I do hope she continues pushing forward, is that she's creating a new niche. She's creating a new style. She's paving the way. This should feel encouraging for her. And to Case, I hope you don't quit art. I hope that you don't quit Instagram. And I hope you can see that people are standing behind you. People are really rallying. You know, your artwork was going somewhere. I think that it's important that you continue going in the direction aesthetically that you find beautiful. I think if this went undiscussed, it would be a huge loss, and just more things are going to happen like this. I've voiced my beliefs in this video, and I've tried to lay out kind of what happened, and I want to keep the discussion going. I don't want to fan the flames. I'm hoping more than anything that people that see this video will feel the flames a bit quelled, a bit died down. None of these artists are evil, and none of these artists have necessarily done anything morally wrong. Every one of them made huge strides to actually do the right thing and to take steps in the right direction. They're all trying very hard, and I think it's important to remember that. Okay, thanks for listening. I don't know, man. I'm just gonna go to sleep. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you have any opinions on this. All right, see ya.